Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Are you passionate about creating amazing podcasts? Terrific. You are in the right place. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route. My guest today is Mary Chan. Welcome, Mary. How are you this morning?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Good. Every time I talk to you or listen to your show, I'm always thinking I should put a pop filter on this mic. You have a radio background, so I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
So people listening, Mary's show is, and I always get nervous. Like podcast names are like names to me. I want to get them right. It's a podcaster's guide to a visible voice, which really is a very brilliant thing because podcasters audio visible voice. So there's a whole rabbit hole there about, I really think that's a smart thing to say to people because anytime you can make people think, and I don't mean like think this person's weird. I mean, think like that's interesting.
Yeah,
So I love that it's right in the title. Pod Talk is like right on the nose.
exactly.
The can says tuna. So that's what's in there. So Mary's show is, I'm gonna out myself, is one of the very few shows that's actually in the subscribe on my podcast player. Like as podcasters, we have many, many, many episodes. I have thousands of episodes, but yours is the only show, like not the only, but one of a few shows that comes up. You just did a great episode on video. It might be so darn new that I think I saw it like in my player, but I don't think I saw it in some I don't know. When was that out? That's pretty recent.
Just on Monday, and today is Thursday. I think, yes.
So I do recommend everybody go listen to all of our episodes. There's also one that her and I did, which is episode 82 or something like that. So if you want to hear more of me, please don't. There's more of me. But her most recent episode about video is really interesting. I recommend listening to it because, and I'm getting, people listening, Craig, get to the point. When I was listening to it, video, I don't care about video. But you were asking questions like rhetorically about where is your audience? Like as if she was talking to Craig. Craig, like, do you care about video? Is your audience on YouTube? And she goes to, I don't want to say great length because it's succinct, but talking about how people listen and when they listen and why they listen. And this has all made me think, I think too many podcasters second guess themselves, asking for a friend. That's the same. So I wanted to start by asking you about, do you find that, is it like everybody does this, where we not necessarily are attracted by the new cool toy, but we're constantly bigger, better, more, faster. Well, if I did this, I'd do that. You and I start talking about Substack because you can podcast on Substack now, people. So that's kind of my question. It doesn't have a question mark. Is what is this thing about? What is it about us all second guessing ourselves? And is it inherent to the creative process, or what's up with that?
I love that little bit on the creative process because it is. I think it is part of that creative process where we do like to test things out and we're like, ooh, shiny new object, let's go over here. And then see like, oh, wait, but all my friends are doing this, quote unquote friends for this meaning, social
Right.
media, etc. So maybe I need to do this too. And that's totally okay. I think podcasting is great for that playing in the sandbox and a testing ground. But I think we should also take a step back first and be, okay, do we even want to dip that toe into the sandbox? Like, what is the point of video for your particular show? And just because everybody else is doing it and the big companies are making their algorithms look like it's the next best thing on earth, what does that look like for your show and specifically your audience? Because yes, we create our shows because they're fun to do. They might be a passion project, but really, we also create these shows because it's for our listener. And so that listener that is listening, that one ideal listener, your super fan, are they even on Substack reading newsletters? Are they even YouTube users? Do they only listen to shorts watch shorts on YouTube, right? Like, what are their habits like? And if that's where they are, then okay, let's get into that sandbox and test out video. But if they're not, then what's the point? Why are you adding all this extra work, which a video portion is? Why are you adding all that extra work to your podcast workflow?
Amen. I was like, thank you for dressing me down because I need to be told, because I keep thinking all I'd have to do, is click the other button that says record the video too, right? And then I'll have an extra
Yes.
gigabyte and then blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And um, I'm, I'm like, I got too many ideas. One is I want to know more about Speak with Spirit, which nobody who isn't watching would have any idea what I'm talking about. But before we go there, I really was thinking, so I'm like walking and then I'm like stopping and I'm listening to your thoughts on video as I was listening to the episode. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, oh, I feel like a podcast isn't about whether it's audio or video. A podcast is the format that is not cinematographic. What? So I've watched off camera with, is it Sam Jones? I think it's Sam Jones. It's a really good podcast, but it's actually a documentary. It's like him. It's like two people in chairs, But I see five separate camera angles, and I know that there are
Oh,
two
yeah.
boom mics. Plus, there's
Yup.
at least two mics hidden under the tables. Plus, they have lavs on, and they're double lavs. So I'm like, there's like 9 audio tracks I can see in the shot, and it's got. I mean, it's like a production, and I'm like, that's not a podcast. It's not a TV show either. But I feel like as a podcaster now, literally as I was walking an hour ago, I was thinking, oh yeah, I don't want to do that level of visual creativity. That's not what Craig is into. So suddenly I felt free of like, yeah, so there's no point in just like recording two side by side Zoom talking heads. And I don't know how to really split that hair, but it just kind of like arrested me in a moment of like, yeah, yes, they're both visual, but what those TV shows or those movies are doing, like even the really huge podcasts, which is two people sitting across a table and they have the expensive mic in their faces and then they have lots of cameras and audio, that's still a podcast. What am I looking at? I'm looking at two people record a podcast as opposed to I'm watching a documentary and the technology is disappeared outside the frame, or like you can tell they're working to do that, but just outside the frame, there's all this effort. So I don't know. That's just I don't know if I want to call it a nuance. I think that makes it sound too smart. That's a distinction that I just thought of about when is it a podcast? When is it not a podcast?
Yeah. And most people are like, well, when there's a microphone and two people are talking, that's a podcast, right?
That's what I'm arguing for. Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter the format, but if you are looking at your ideal listener, or maybe in this case, ideal viewer, what are their preferences for your show? What do they need in order to stay listening or watching to your show? And if it's just two talking heads, sure, if that's what they like. But I bet you the shows that they are watching, the podcasts that they are watching, have a lot more production value to it.
Yeah.
You talked about all the different mics, but again, it's a visual medium. There's also their backdrop, lighting,
Lighting,
multiple lighting in the ceiling, right?
makeup, right?
Makeup,
Wardrobe,
hair, wardrobe.
set
There's
design.
mhm. And then that's only the recording part. There's also unless it's a show like yours where you don't do much editing, there's also the
Nope.
editing of the video. And
Right.
then, so you're not only editing audio, but you also need to make that transition for the video seamless.
Yeah.
And that's where the multiple camera angles come in. And there's just so much more involved to make a video stand out. So, how much capacity, budget, time do you want to invest into video to what's the end goal? To grow your show, to
I
monetize
feel
your
like
show? Like what is that end goal?
I feel like I'd be just bashing my head against the wall because I know that I don't have the resources, the time, the energy to like pull it off well. So I'm like, I think I should just not even put my baby toe in that swimming pool because I will just try to do it better and better, and I'll never be able to do it um, to the level that I think it should be done. If I
Mhm.
felt that this is what my people who are watching needed, then I'd be like, well, I can't deliver that, and I
Yeah.
maybe that to me is just like the realization I had while I was walking. It's like, oh, I suddenly feel okay with, no, I just do audio.
Yeah, audio
I
is
know it's
great.
much easier for guests when I tell them, I mean, like, Mary, you're disqualified, professional, 20 years of radio. But
Yeah,
most people that I
yeah,
say, hey, I'll be on a podcast, a lot of them ask video, like, because video wigs the
yep,
normal people out. Like, it's like, I don't want, no,
yep.
they have a bad hair day, right? Um,
Exactly. And I have a client too who's testing out this video waters with me because she really wants to try and she really thinks it will be um, good for the growth of her show. And so we're not doing a video podcast, we're still doing an audio podcast, but we are using elements of video for the promotional pieces, right? So
Brilliant. Yes.
she is using it just for social media posts, promotion, marketing, talking about her show, and when we started, it was just like the Zencaster
Right.
Zoom. It's just the video. And then we're like, but is that even exciting? Like, even when you're looking at a YouTube short, those shorts or an Instagram reel or the TikTok videos, they're still highly produced in those 60 seconds or however long they are. So then she was like, wait, maybe I need another camera angle. So then she started recording her iPhone at the same time. And then sometimes she would forget to record the iPhone. So then she would start again and then hit record and then do that. But then the angle was off so that when you
Mm,
made that video cut, it wasn't smooth and it looked weird visually for me. Coming from an audio person, I'm not a video editor, but I went to broadcast school that had the TV element. So, like, I know of what video would look good. And I was like, this is
yeah.
just off. And so there's still a lot of work. And then we're building in the captions and spelling. And then she's like, I washed my hair today. Like, I put a lot of effort in this. I
Special effort.
for all of this for my podcast now. So she's like, there's multiple layers, and we're not even doing a video podcast, right? It's still just the video for marketing
Mm,
purposes, which is a smaller thing in comparison, but still a lot of things that you don't think of when you're like going from audio only podcast to video podcast or video
yeah.
parts of a podcast.
And we're all spoiled. And I mean this in a good way. We're all spoiled about like, oh yeah, and once I do the final mix down, a half hour is like 30 megabytes. We just throw these files around like they're nothing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can fit them in email. They're not quite,
Yes.
but like they almost fit as email attachments these days. But video is like a whole nother, Megillah. And people just think, oh, I'll just grab this. I'll just hit export. They're like, what's my computer doing? Oh yeah, give that a half an hour. And then you get
Yeah,
this giant.
exactly. And then when you have the multiple camera angles, if you're planning on doing that, right? Like, again,
Yeah,
back to
two
that
times, three
client that
times.
I was working with, we were like, okay, Zencaster, we got the video there. But then she's like, well, what do I do with my iPhone stuff? I'm like, well, you got to put it on the cloud because I have to get it.
Yep.
And then
And
it
then you
was
got to time sync it,
upping her
right? Because it's
storage.
all,
Yep.
oh,
And then I was like, well, maybe you got to start compressing that file before you send it to me. And then it's
yeah.
another added step and another thing and another thing. We're like, okay, how do we streamline this now?
Yeah. I was just like, I know too much about movies and I'm like, oh yeah, they need clapboards and it's like lights, camera, set beat. It's like, oh, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
there's like a whole team to do this. Okay. Tell me, I'm like, turn signal.
Boop, boop, boop.
Tell me more about Speak with Spirit, which, okay, cat's out of the bag. There's a sign in the back, that I can see that says Speak with Spirit, which I'm guessing this is core to your mission, would be my guess.
Yeah, and it comes from, again, my radio background, right? When I worked in radio, I produced commercials. So I did a bit of an on-air thing, but my main job was making those commercials. And sometimes I'd have small business owners come in. They'd have a script that our writers have written for them, but the salespeople are the ones that were like, "Oh, you need to be the voice of your commercial." So like they kind of force them to come, and they're so nervous and they're not quite sure how to pull this off. They've never done this before, never been behind a mic. And so I started, to coach them on voice direction and how you speak and stuff like that. And then when I brought all that stuff into my podcast production and consulting company, I started the business in 2018. And at first I was like, I don't know
Congrats.
what I'm doing. This is a business, this is podcasting. It's different than radio. And then I quickly realized a lot of the things that I was doing in radio translates into podcasting. Duh. Like Why didn't I think about that when I've like, it was just this amazing thing when I started speaking to clients or potential clients, and they were just like, I've never done something like this before. I don't know. Can I pull it off? I'm like,
Mm.
anyone can do this. That's the great thing about podcasting, that you are able to spread your message, to be wholly yourself. And again, because we didn't have that video portion when the whole, podcasting was first there, you can podcast in your pajamas, don't have to wash your hair, like all of the
Podcast in your
stuff.
closet, right?
Yes, right? People still do that. And it's the fact that when you don't have those restrictions, you're kind of free to just speak about who you really are, what you are passionate about. And that's where the spirit comes from. It is about that passion that people have about a particular topic or message. And a podcast is such a great way to spread that message, because you can do all the blog posts you want, you can do all the social media captions you want, but when you say something out loud with different pacing, with different energy, loudness, softness, that all means something. Like one of my favorite examples is you can say, I love pineapples. You can type that. You can add all the emojis you want or exclamation marks, but it won't sound the same as when you say, I love pineapples, or,
Right.
oh, I love pineapples. Or even sarcasm, like, oh, yeah, I love pineapples. Same three
Exactly.
words, but they all mean different things until you speak with spirit and say it out loud.
I was so I sometimes I get guests who have and I screw up tech too. I did an episode where I had the wrong mic selected, so we got Craig's iMac.
That
did
happens
a
all the
did
time.
a passable job, but I wasn't
Yeah.
going to delete it because I was really glad I had the guest. But sometimes people show up with I call them gamer headsets. It's got like a
Yeah.
boom arm thing on it, and what you're talking about there, we all take for granted all of the information that we get because we can hear the person's voice moving. You can hear when someone is tense.
Mm.
You can hear how big they are, or they can train and try to sound bigger. But when you get a guest who has one of those boom arms, my heart drops a little bit because I know why they have them, and they always work okay. But no matter how excited that guest gets, they get really excited, but their mouth never moves with respect to the microphone. Like they can never go, oh my God. Like they can't do that because the mic is like right.
Attached to
And
their mouth.
you get the plosives and all this stuff too, but it's always like right in that same space. And I've always thought there's magic when you're talking to someone. There's magic in, like, if you're walking side by side, you can hear them and you can tell how close they are. And I've always loved
Mm.
that about audio. And that's the thing I love about, I try not to like, one of the things about this mic is I can't get too close to it. And it requires me to kind of stay near it, but don't touch it because it has handling noises, like it's not really a great broadcast mic. And I've always liked that about it because it forces me to be mindful and to like try to, like, because the audience, where are they? I mean, I can talk to Mary, but the audience is missing. So it's like, the audience is in here. I'm like, I can talk to them, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
And
always
it's,
fascinated by how it works, like the
yeah.
nuts and bolts of how it works.
It's always the theater of the mind. So your audience is in your head. They're there with you. It's not what you think in their head, but they're with you along the way. And I think that's another great thing about podcasting is that you are the advocate for your listener. So
Hmm.
when you come up with a follow-up question, that curiosity should also come from, ooh, I bet the listener would really want to know that. I personally, as the host, might know it, but I bet the listener doesn't know the answer to this. So I'm going to ask because you are their advocate. And so that theater of the mind to really paint the picture for the listener and to let them be in on that conversation is such a great use of podcasting that I don't think a lot of people do, because they're like, well, podcasts are mostly interviews. You're just talking to each other, right? No, the listener
No,
is there too.
no. In the video episode that I was talking about, it was just host on mic. I suck at host on mic.
Mm.
Um, and I know how to fix that. It's like talk to people who are good at it and get tips and do, like if I really wanted to get better, I'm sure, I think I could learn. I don't know. Maybe I couldn't.
You could.
But when I hear someone do host on mic really well, it accentuates that thing you're talking about. Like, not only am I in the theater with them, but I know that there's nobody else. It's just me and them. Whereas
Yes.
people here know that there's two people who, like, I'm waving my hands and she can see me, and like we are literally in conversation and people are
Mhm.
listening in the theater. It's like watching two performers on a black box theater stage. But when host on mic is done really well, I think it accentuates that. It like, it's like, whoa, I'm in a black box theater and they're like looking at me, and they're not just like looking at the fourth wall. They're literally looking at you, or literally talking to you in this case. So I thought you do that really well. There are a lot of people who do it really well. And it's something that I've tried a few times and went, yikes, don't do that.
But it is talking to your ideal listener, and I feel that's always the foundational base of when I talk to people who wanna start a podcast. I'm like, "Who are you talking to?" I want you to not only be like, "Oh, demographics. Oh, she's probably a woman, a mom with 2 kids in her late 30s." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. That's great, but
It's a good start.
who?
Yeah.
What's her name? Where does she live? What kind of shopping does she like to do? Does she plan her meals? Does her kids play soccer?" Like, you wanna really get fine-tuned into that so you have this theater of the mind, the picture of who this person is in your mind when you are doing those solo episodes, so that you are speaking to Penny. The name Penny just popped into my head. So I'm like, if this person is named Penny, you can see Penny, you can see what she looks like, and you are speaking directly to her. So it's never just yourself in a box in the room, in your closet, in your living room, in your office, wherever you're recording. You are talking to Penny. Penny and you are having a conversation right now, and she's asking you these questions that are in your head only, but you respond on the podcast.
Hmm.
It's never a solo episode is never a solo episode. That's the
Episode.
magic of
I love when I get schooled.
it. So you too, Craig,
I
you
only
too can do
I
this.
only do this because I'm trying to get better. It's the only reason to do any of this. So this show in particular is really just a giant excuse to pick everybody's brain about podcasting. What? Let's see. So we've probably had 3 or 4 conversations. I don't know. I think we did a pre-call at one point. I don't know. It's like I've been
Yeah.
talking to you for like over a year now. Whoa, it's like forever in
We're
podcasting
best
friends,
friends, Craig. We're best friends.
podcasting besties. I'm torn. I have 2 questions that one question I was thinking before we even started, which was, what are your thoughts on podcasting besties, but in the good sense of like not somebody who's just going to reshare your work, but like somebody that you get on a call with regularly and you chat. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit as sort of like the self-care for podcasters. Like, what are your thoughts on, I'm a big fan of it, but what are your thoughts on it? Have you seen people fail miserably because you felt they were in a silo by themselves, or,
Yeah, there
oh,
is a
we
lot
should have
of
had video for
that.
that look. We needed video
Yeah,
for that
my
look right there.
eyes are bulging out. My mouth is wide open going, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, um, I mean, again, you go into your podcast. What is the end goal? What is the point of this? And you can quickly tell if you are a guest on other people's shows, you can quickly tell if the host is into this based on, I'm just trying
Mm,
to monetize my show, or they're actually trying to create a community,
mm.
because they are either going to just be like, okay, here's all your assets from the episode. Please share it out. Chat soon. You never hear from them again. Or you actually have the people who are like, okay, well, I do want to connect with you on LinkedIn, not just because it's the thing to do, but then they start, posting, commenting to your posts, or you actually create and nurture that relationship a little bit where, yeah, we could be besties, Craig, but I think maybe we've chatted online, over email, in person a handful of times, maybe?
The email thread's kind of old. In fact, the email
Yeah,
thread says
yeah.
re-canceled and a date. And every time I see it, I'm like, oh no. Oh no, wait, no,
Yeah.
that's the email that I
Yeah,
had
that
to
was
cancel.
old.
So it's
But
an
but
old email thread.
it's that, community that we've built, that trust that we've
Yeah, the more
built
you talk, the more
amongst.
you
Yeah.
understand where the other person's coming from.
Yeah. I had an episode, I don't remember which episode number this was, but it was late last year, and it was somebody who was a previous guest who I now still continue a LinkedIn relationship with. Every now and then we still get on a little Zoom call just to catch up because we had personal things that, resonated with each other. And so we've become friends. And he had a podcasting question for me. And he was like, hey, there's a guy that I was a guest on. And then he eventually stopped connecting with me on LinkedIn, but he just reconnected and he was asking for a favor to share something with my network. That feels kind of, should I do that? And then I did, but then I didn't hear back from him and I feel ghosted. Like, what is this? And I'm like,
didn't even get dinner first. Yes.
yeah. So it's ask, right? Like, gimme, 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 gimme. Is that the relationship you actually want? What is the point of your podcast? And do you want to continue talking to that person? And it's almost like making friends in real life. I know a lot of people, they're like, ooh, in person, still awkward. Real life social situations, still awkward. But if you actually wanted to be a friend to one of your guests on your show, will you? Like, do you ever see that relationship going outside of the podcast?
Yeah.
And if you do, then that might be a good guest for your show. Like, there's just that alignment piece. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have everybody that you love and agree with that will be on your show, but it's nice to be able to curate. And that's why you have an interview style podcast as well. It's why you curate the show to have people express their heart's desires, messages, whatever it is.
Yeah, it adds dots to the to the constellation.
Yeah.
I was also thinking your the way you're describing, a developing friendship. Like what happens is, like, I listened to one of your episodes and I'm like, oh, that's a really good point. And then I'm thinking about it, so like 2 days later, it's not that I'm thinking about it continuously, but like 2 days later, I'm like, oh, I should probably message Mary about that because I have this quite, and like, it's not just that I set out in the beginning. So just like zooming out to more general, it's not that you set out at the beginning, like, oh, this person would be a good friend, I'm going to work on a friendship.
Yeah, no.
It's like the things resonate and then you go, oh, let's get this out of my head. I should message back. And then like that becomes a virtuous cycle of this person's, when things resonate, then they go, why am I waving my hands? Nobody can see. I'm totally like video in my head today.
But yeah, and I think that is also the piece that people wish happens more in podcasting. As a host, we wish more for that feedback, for people to message us, to email us or whatever. But, I get that life gets in the way, or you're just thinking about it in the moment and then, it passes. But that's another thing I think as podcasting hosts, as an advocate for the industry, I think we need to be more active in the commenting and giving feedback to other hosts.
Once more, louder for the people in the back. I say that.
So it becomes almost commonplace. It's a social norm then. And then other listeners will start doing that because they'll hear the feedback if you share that feedback on your episode or whatever, right? Like, I think it needs, although podcasting is great, we are creating this dialogue, but that missing link still is the listener piece coming in. And so I think as hosts, we need to create that space and make it happen.
Yeah. I have the luck, the privilege I've had, I'm going to say, a lot of feedback. This show kind of is stapled into an online community platform.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
I get it. It's like a huge labor of love, and there are people who pay voluntarily to like support that project, cover hosting and stuff. But like every once in a while, a podcaster that I haven't talked to in like whatever a year will just like drop in and like reply to something, and then I'm just like, yep, that's why I do all the, like, I'm going to do all the work necessary for that one opportunity. Cause it's just like, that would have never happened. I would have lost touch with that person completely if I hadn't been like spinning the plates to keep that going. So that's one thing is I would say to people, if you have any, platform, like conceptual, like you're really visible on Instagram or something, and you get every once in a while, you get a bit of feedback. That's huge. Like that would not have existed. That person's around the world. They're not going to come over and ring your doorbell and say hello. That'd be weird.
Or
I'll,
welcoming, maybe.
yeah.
Hi.
I don't know. I have met people in person who have listened to the show. The first show that I started, it's called Movers Mindset. Listeners would know. 9 years ago, I just did episode
Mm.
182 yesterday,
Woohoo.
and that juggernaut of a thing. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm when I say to people like, I don't know if you've listened, they're like, oh my God, of course I've heard of the show. And the first time that you run into someone in public at like I was in a movement event, and I random person be like, hi, how are you? And I say, hello, I'm Craig. And they literally went, oh, you're that guy. Like they recognized that.
Yes.
That was weird. But my next question, so have a question ready. My next question was like, what's your favorite episode? And they had one. And that's like a gold mine of like,
That is
when
the
would you ever bump into a
best.
person and they would just give you feedback on your work? That never happens at a regular job. But in podcasting, it can happen.
It can. And it's amazing when that happens. I love that story because you, as a listener who loves a show, you really do feel like you're part of that host's circle. Like
Yeah,
you're part of their
you are.
life. You're their friend. Sometimes I gotta say I gotta call my mom more often, but like I probably have listeners who talk and listen to me more than when I call my mom, right? Like
Mm,
there's just that intimate connection in a podcast. And when you produce a weekly show or a bi-weekly show or however
yeah,
long your frequency is, you have that constant connection and they've become a friend. They essentially have. You
yeah.
might not have ever met them, but if you ever do meet, it'll be a quick friendship because that bond has already been created through the podcast.
It's yeah, like I try not to talk too much. I know I don't succeed. People listening rolling their eyes. But I am aware that every time I tell a story, it's like I'm adding old school. I'm adding 35 millimeter mounted slides to the little carousel there, and
Yeah.
people who listen to all the episodes, they're like see all those slides, and it is a little. I don't want to say it's what's the word? Like oh, I'm kind of putting myself out there. This is a little dangerous. It's not really. But it is strange to think that somebody could listen to all these and probably know most of my better stories are in here somewhere.
Yeah. And your quirks and things like that, like how you speak, your cadence. I have a friend who is a realtor in town and she started a podcast, right? And one of her things was that she didn't realize at the time, but she had somebody who was moving from the other coast and wanted to buy a house
Hmm.
where she works and lives. And so they flew out, and immediately that client was like, oh, so and so, and da and cracking jokes. And like, I love it when you say that. And she was like,
It's
we
like,
just
well,
met.
just met, right?
Yeah. And I
No,
was
we
like, oh,
didn't.
wait,
I've been
no,
lurking the shit out of
podcast.
you for a year and a half, right?
Exactly. So it's amazing how these relationships get built
Huh.
on podcasts. It's amazing, but not amazing, right? Like this is what we're doing. We're creating a community and a connection with people.
Yeah. There's a whole. So when I started podcasting, I had zero clue. I had a friend said, try this mic and get, a Zoom base
Mhm.
H4 or something. And I just started and just did everything wrong and then asked questions and kept going from there. So I completely missed out on the whole, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to say? I never got any of that input. And it was way into my journey before it even occurred to me that I could have been somebody else on the microphone. Like that never even occurred to me. So when if I run into somebody who's heard the show, especially Movers Mindset, and they go, wow, you're like exactly the same weirdo. Like this is exactly what I'm like in real life, except I'm waving my hands. I'm Italian, so that's the only way I can talk. And I sometimes I'm really impressed. I listen to a show and I'm like, I wonder if the person is really like that. So now I don't want to wig you out, but if people have been listening to Mary now for like in 30 minutes or so, go listen to her video host on mic episode. And there's a small difference. It's like
Yeah.
Mary's a little more polished, but not that different. I'm like, nope, I feel like you're the same person with the same piece of glass in front of you. It's just, there's no verbal tics. I can tell there's not a lot of punch and roll, but like, it's really good. And I feel like when I try to do host on mic, I turn into this person. It's like, it's bad. So I guess
But
my question, how do you self-assess? Like, so how do you, Mary, how do you self-assess that? How do you know when you've done a good job on host on mic?
It takes years of training, first of all. Again, I started in radio school in 1998. Okay.
My
So I'm, and still today, I'm like, every now and then, I'm still like, oh, I'm going a little too high there. Cause that was my
God.
thing when I was like, oh, I don't want to sound like a little girl. And no,
Oh yeah.
sometimes I
Up,
go
up,
up
up, 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 up,
there.
up, up. Yeah. That doesn't
So,
happen to
like, I
me.
still work on that sometimes, right? But it is about listening to yourself, listening to past episodes, and not listening for, like, the cringy parts because you know what's gonna happen in the episode, you did it, but listening with that discerning ear about what is the emotional piece that is drawing
Mm,
you in to the voice right now? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Or even, like, you don't wanna be a copycat of somebody else. So, like, if you have a podcaster that you love listening to and you wanna emulate that voice, what is it about the quality of that person's voice that you love? Because you're not gonna sound exactly like the host because everyone's voice is like a
mm,
unique thumbprint. You all have your uniqueness, and so but what quality do you enjoy about that host? Is it their pacing, their warmth, the smile, the hug that they give you, that audio hug? Like, what is it that you wanna emulate? So then you can try maybe slowing down with your pacing, not like slowing down all the time, that is monotone, but trying if you're a fast speaker all the time, slow it down for a few words just to make a point. Or if you tend to be really quiet, project a few times on a few words just to vary it up and be like, "Ooh, I'm excited about this." And then go back to your serene Zen voice that you
mm.
have, which people love too. So it's not about good or bad, loud is good, projecting is good, soft is bad, but it's having that variety in your voice and knowing when to use it, and that knowing piece just comes from daily practice and listening back. And
Listening
that
back.
comes from my radio school days. I mean, most people are like, "Ooh, I published the episode. I don't want to listen to it anymore." But if you want to learn and grow, you need to
Subscribe to your own
listen.
show. That's
Subscribe to your
harsh.
own
Yes.
show, listen to it because, in radio school, we had cassette tapes back then, and every
Yeah.
time you turned the microphone on, the button would automatically start
Start.
recording on the cassette tape. And then when our air shift was done, we take that cassette tape with our instructor and we listen to every single time the mic turned on, we would listen and then critique it.
Hmm.
Not to say what was bad, but what can we learn from this experience? How are you feeling in that moment? What kind of emotions can you shift so that that gets shifted from your voice?
I'm just going to keep because that's well, great. Tell me more. Did you find that the practice had to be really intentional? Like, oh, this needs to be warmer. So then you had to actually practice being warmer, make notes to be warmer? Or was the act of simply reflecting and introspecting enough to steer the ship? See where I'm going? Like, did you have to
Yep.
actually grab the
Yep.
rudder or can you just,
It's gonna be different for each person. Some people need the visual cues. So when I started, I actually had a physical photo of somebody as my ideal listener, and I pasted it next to my microphone
hmm,
so I could talk to that one person. And then eventually I needed little sticky notes for, yeah, warmth or louder or whatever you need. So, like, that was there. And then it just took repetitive listening. I remember so in radio, like, the live announcers aren't usually live anymore, they're all pre-recorded, and
yeah.
so when I worked in radio, I was live from 10 to 2, and then I would record the evening shift, so, like, 6 to 10 or something like that. So when I'm making dinner at home or in the evening, I would listen to the radio and listen to my voice on the radio
Oh, auto playback, right?
on auto playback, and then at one point, it took, like, 6 months to a year working at this small independent radio station, listening to myself from 6 to 10 every night going, "Oh," and something just clicked. I heard the way I said something, and I was like, that's it. I love that. Whatever I did there, I need to emulate that again." So just then going back into my brain, okay, what was happening in that moment when I
Mm,
recorded that piece? Was it like an emotional thing? Was it the prep that I did that just had all the things lined up? Like, what was it? And then just figuring that out along the way. So, it's not going to be about failing, it is about
mm,
trying. And that's the great thing about podcasts. We have episodes where you record one. And if you were like, oh, that wasn't great, well, you learn from that and then you record another one.
yeah. I'm watching our time, but I also want to ask, what do you do in terms of your actual, like when you go right in to work with a guest for when you're recording? Like, so you're back up, Craig. Some of Mary's episodes have guests, and some of Mary's episodes are hosted on mic. So when you have a guest, do you bring, I'm guessing you don't, but do you bring your questions with you, or like how much do you load into your head a day in advance or a week in advance or the hour before? Because I have the way I do everything, but I've already talked about that.
Well, part of that was what, again, radio days, it's just everything that I learned from radio. It's called show prep. And
Mm-hmm.
so you got to do your show prep based on, my teachers, my instructors would say, like well ahead of time, you need to plan. When you're planned, you're prepared. And when you're prepared, you sound great on the air. But I get it. Podcasters, we got life, we got business, we got family, we got things happening. So, what usually happens the way I do things is when I see the potential guest where I'm like, ooh, they'll make a great person to be on my show. I have everything set up on a Trello board. So I quickly create a Trello card. I note down why I want to bring them on. What was the thing that made me go,
Oh, that's
ooh,
important. Yes.
this is why I want them here. Note that all down. And then I've got a running list of people that I want to have on the show. And then when I'm ready to email them, I can email them and tell them, hey, these are the reasons why I want to have you on the show. And then once they say yes, then I will take some time to do more research, check out their website, listen to other episodes they've been on, revisit whatever that initial spark was, whether it was an article or a podcast that you listened to them on or wherever, revisit that. And then just sort of come up with a outline of where do you want that conversation to take place. So what is that journey, that audio journey that you want them to speak about? And again, the best conversations like are the ones that are impromptu, they have the follow-up, that they're not scripted questions. But what I like to do is still know, how are you going to get into the episode? What sort of that journey you want to take? And then how are you going to get out? So that there is a path that you're taking and a point, quote unquote, maybe like a point to the episode. And I mean, you did something that was very similar when we started. You were like, oh, I listened to your video episode. I want to talk about this and I'm curious about this. And it's not like we're going to directly go down those lines, but if that's where the conversation takes us, that's awesome. I'd be kind of prepared for that. And for the people who aren't used to talking and going on the fly, they love structure like that. So giving them a bit of structure is always helpful, whether they are a seasoned guest speaker or not.
Hmm. Terrific. I was just thinking of all the many guests I've had people show up and bring their notebook computer with Excel spreadsheets.
Oh, wow.
And
Yes. Yes.
that's the most prepared I have ever seen a guest. It went very well. And like, as we were talking, I think they were ticking off things like we got to that, it was fine. But some people are very organized like that. And some people I know, after having talked to them, that if I had shown up prepared like that as the host, they would have freaked out.
Mhm.
I've done not a ton, but I've done a lot of in the field recording of podcasts. And at one point I was working out of a flat in London for days on end, and I had a PA. Oh, what a godsend to have help. I had a PA who was commuting in, like to show up in the morning and then work there all day. And we quickly realized that my putting together the podcast gear on a tabletop was necessary. They had to see that, because if they showed up and it was all set up, it was like they were showing up for their execution or something, and they would like run and hide on the sofa. So we started like half taking things apart between conversations to make sure we were like ready to not look ready. So that whole being sensitive to like what is going to work for this guest, I think that's super astute. I think you make some great points. But
Yeah, because some people are like, "Well, I do have my questions. Do I send that to the guest? Do I not?" Or then some
have you
people are
ever
like,
lied to people? Am I the only one that does this?
"Yeah,
I have people insist, you must send me the questions. Like,
yeah, yeah."
okay, I will send you some questions. Like,
What I usually recommend is, okay, if those people are really insisting because that's what they need to in order to be
yeah.
comfortable behind the mic. And that's what you want them to be. You want your guests to be comfortable, to be able to share their thoughts and feelings. So if you put up that barrier of, nope, I don't have questions, I got nothing for you. Well, they're going to
Yeah.
come in clammed up, nervous. They might just say, no, never mind, I'm not going to come on.
Yeah.
So you got to give them space to have um, that psychological safe space for them to be okay. I don't, you could always be honest with them and say, this is kind of where I want to take it. I might not ask you all of these questions, and I'm definitely going to have follow up questions that won't be on this list, but this gives you an idea of the topics that we'll talk about.
Mm.
And I would say 99% of the time, that works. That eases their anxiety because they just have anxiety over preparedness and how they're going to be representative, right, of themselves and how they show up. And they want to do a good job. They want to be professional. They want to sound good for your show. So
Right.
you need to support them in sounding good as well.
I'm chuckling because like you're such a professional. You take all there's like I don't even have to do anything. You just can finish your point and get to the end and stop talking. I'm like, this is a delight. This particular show for Pod Talk, it is often nice because podcasters are really good at like passing the conversational baton back and forth. On some of my other stuff, it can get a little chaotic. Like in post production, like what the hell happened here? So it's a delight always to talk to people who are professional. I love talking to people who aren't professional, but professional podcasters are delightful to talk to. Any last thoughts? I have one last question I want to ask, but anything on top of your mind that you're like, oh, I wonder, or you want to say, or what have I not mentioned? I definitely said the name of your show, but let's put it in here again. So it's A Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. And I
Yeah.
checked, it's available everywhere podcasts are
Yeah.
heard, including places that aren't podcasting platforms.
Or just
Spotify, I'm
look
looking
up
at you.
visible voice and then it's the purple
The
logo.
purple one. Yes.
Yeah, the purple one.
Which is a
So,
good challenge. People look up your own show and scroll and make sure you can see
yes.
yourself. Like, does it stand out? But sorry, I was asking you, anything top of mind here at the end of our ramble?
Nothing really top of mind. Like, I just like to shoot the breeze and,
Yeah,
like,
I
what
agree.
is that last question of yours? That's what's
Um,
top of mind. What is your last
one
question?
one book that you think every podcaster should read. Doesn't have to be a
Oh,
podcasting book.
oh, I have it behind me.
Oh my God, you're like my evil twin. I do that. Like nobody can see it, but I insist on getting the book and holding it up.
Putting the dust off of it. I haven't opened
Whoa,
it in a
whoa,
little
whoa!
while.
Look at all the post-it notes sticking out of the side.
Yeah,
It's
this
like,
is my favorite book on voice.
mm,
It's by Samara Bay. It's called
mm.
Permission to Speak. And every podcaster needs to read this because the subtitle of this is How to Change What Power Sounds Like, starting with you.
Ooh, ooh, that's good.
And I mean, it doesn't talk about, it's not about podcasting, but it is about how your voice has a message. Your voice is something that's really important, especially now. So why aren't we using it? And how then can we use it, especially for those who have, like me, when I was a little kid, I was the third kid, the youngest daughter, and I was always told to just be like, look pretty, serve tea to
Shh,
my
be
dad's
quiet.
friends, right? And be
Yeah.
quiet. And my anti-rebel in me was like, no, I'm going to radio school. I'm talking for a living. And so this book is part of that for me, that little love story to myself as a little girl. It's okay to speak up. It is okay to share your thoughts. So Samara Bay, Permission to Speak, book, read it.
Outstanding. Mic drop. Terrific. I will just say it was everything I hoped it would be. I'm glad that we finally connected to do this. When did we we recorded like May of 24 or something like
Oh,
that.
wow. Yeah, I think so.
And then I had an illness and like 24 evaporated from me. And then you dropped the episode and I was like, oh, this is great. I can listen to like to remind myself why I love doing this. So I'm so glad that I finally had a chance to get you on here. I'm also tickled pink that I don't know what season this is for Pod Talk, but that this gets to be the first episode. So there are people out there who have no idea this is coming. It's just going to pop up in their player. I'm like,
I'll
this
be
is
there.
awesome.
Yes.
Simple pleasures for simple minds. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you so much, Mary. And it was a delight to talk to you. I'm sure our paths will cross again. Maybe we'll do some more episodes. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And like we're podcasting friends, like we were talking about. We will connect again.